6 upgrade. So today I'm going to be installing the XXL2 chassis, guys. Now if you didn't know, the XXL2 chassis is a little bit longer than the one that's on the Aftershock. So yeah, either way you look at it, this is going to be a long process. So let's go ahead and get it over with. First thing I'm going to do is take off all 4 of the tires by undoing the 5mm nut that holds them on. The tires out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and remove the gear cover. It's held on with 2 screws. With that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and take off the fuel line leading to the carburetor as well as the one that leads to the top of the fuel tank. Now to take the fuel tank itself out. It's held in with 3 screws. With those screws out of the way, I can go ahead and pull out the fuel tank. Set that off to the side. Next up, I need to go ahead and pop off the throttle arm that leads to the carb. Once that's taken care of, I'm going to flip the RC upside down and I'm going to remove these 4 screws to take out the engine. With those 4 screws out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and undo this screw and nut that holds on the exhaust to the chassis. With that all taken care of, I can pull out the engine and then set that off to the side. Now I'm going to go ahead and flip the RC over again and I'm going to remove the battery, which is held in with 4 screws. Now I can go ahead and pull off the brace for the battery and then pull the battery out itself. Next up, I need to go ahead and detach each shock tower. Each one's held in with 4 screws. Once that's taken care of, I'm going to go ahead and remove the front and rear upper chassis plate. Each one's held in with 4 screws. Once you get those out of the way, you're going to go ahead and flip the RC over. And now it's time to go ahead and remove the bottom ones. Each one's held in with 8 screws. Now as you see, once you pull off the bottom plates, you'll be able to take off the rear assembly. But as for the front, you'll see that, well, the steering linkage is still connected. So we're going to have to go ahead and take care of all the servos now. Next up, I need to go ahead and remove the receiver box. It's held in with 4 screws. We have 1 on each side and then 2 in the middle. Now that the receiver box has been detached, I'm going to go ahead and open it up. And now I'm going to go ahead and unplug all the servos and then pull the wires out. Now that that's taken care of, I'm going to go ahead and straighten the servo horn completely horizontal. And now I'm going to go ahead and take it off by undoing this screw. Now that I'm just going to pull the servo horn off, set that off to the side. Now I'm going to remove this servo by undoing the 4 screws that hold it in. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull this servo out. Once that's out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and take out the front and rear brace. Each one's held in with 4 screws. Once we get these out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and remove the battery holder. It's held in with 4 screws. Now we can go ahead and set that off to the side. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the front. We need to go ahead and take off all the steering linkage. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get one of the screws. I'm going to screw it in to one of these pegs and then pull the peg out. Do that for each side, just like that. And now all this will go ahead and come apart. Go ahead and pull that out. There we go. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and straighten out the servos straight forward. And I'm going to take off each servo horn by undoing the screw that holds it on. Once you get the servo horns off, we can go ahead and slide the center driveline out and we can move the front assembly to the side. Now it's time to go ahead and take out the steering servos. Each one's held in with 4 screws. Once you get the steering servos out, it's time to go ahead and take out the bottom middle brace. It's held in with 11 screws, 4 on each side and 3 in the middle. With that out of the way, we can go ahead and remove the transmission. It's held in with 4 screws. We have 2 on top and of course 2 on bottom. And now I can go ahead and take out the transmission. Next up, I need to go ahead and undo all of the servo mounts. Some of them have 2 screws, others just have 1. Once all those are removed, it's time to go ahead and take out the center brace. Center brace is held in with 4 screws. Last but not least, I need to go ahead and take out the center rings as well as these wire tie downs. Each one of the center rings is held in just by its own form, so you just have to squeeze it in and push it out. As for these wire ties, you just have to pinch it on each side and it should slide out. And finally, all that's left is to go ahead and take out the center driveline mounts. They just slide right off the chassis. So now that I got everything off the old chassis, I can compare it to the new one. When I put one on top of the other, you can see that the biggest difference is the length. The XXL2 is just a little bit longer. Now there's also a couple differences in the chassis plates themselves. You can see that there's only 3 ports for the new one while there's 5 in this one. However, I never used these 2 ports, so I don't need them, so it doesn't really matter to me. The holes for the steering servo wires are in a different spot, but the biggest difference is this hole. Now the XXL2 does not have a pull starter. The pull starter sits inside of this hole. You can see that this hole is not big enough for the pull starter. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to put 4 nuts in between the engine and the chassis. It's going to raise the engine and allow it to sit on top of this chassis. So in actuality, the only thing I'm going to be switching out right now is this top chassis plate and the side braces. Every other part, guys, all the plates are identical, I kid you not. So let's go ahead and start putting everything on the new chassis. So I went ahead and I put in the mounts for all 3 of the servos, as well as the center braces for the center drive line. Now before I move on, I'll tell you this right now. Since it is a longer chassis, it's going to need a longer center drive lines. I don't have those right now, but it's not going to stop me from putting everything else on this chassis. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and slide in the transmission. It goes in just like that, and it's held in with 4 screws. We have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and get the battery brace. I'm going to line it up in the chassis, and it's held in with 4 screws. With that taken care of, I'm going to take a step back, and I forgot to put this screw in for the transmission. Alright, now with that taken care of, it's time to go ahead and reinstall all 3 of the servos. With those all taken care of, I can go ahead and reattach this horn back to the servo, making sure that it's horizontal the same way I took it off. It's held in with a single screw. After that, I'm going to go ahead and reattach the receiver box. Remember, it goes into this position and it's held in with 4 screws, 1 on each side and then 2 in the middle. With that all taken care of, I'm going to go ahead and flip the RC over, and now it's time to go ahead and put on the top braces. Each one, of course, is held in with 4 screws, 2 on the tip and then 2 in the hole right above it. With those taken care of, it's time to go ahead and flip the RC upside down and reattach the front assembly. Now remember, the servo horns get attached onto the servo. With the horns taken care of, I need to go ahead and slide these holes into position and then reinsert these pegs. Now that those are taken care of, I can go ahead and get the front assembly, slide it into position just like that, make sure everything's lined up, and now I can go ahead and install the bottom plate. Now, I like these brand new red ones, but they're gonna get scratched up, so I'm gonna go ahead and stick with the old silver ones. I'm gonna go ahead and line it up, and it's held in with 8 screws. With that taken care of, you guys can easily see that, yeah, I definitely need the longer center drive lines. However, I'm just going to go ahead and leave that for a future upgrade. For now, I'm going to go ahead and continue moving on. I'm going to get the upper chassis plate. I'm going to slide it into position just like that. It's held onto the brace using 4 screws, 2 on this side and 2 on the other. After that, I'm going to screw down the shock tower. It's held down with 4 screws, 2 on each side. With that all taken care of, I'm going to flip the RC over yet again. And now I'm going to go ahead and slide in the rear assembly. Put the center drive line in right through the middle. And now I'm going to attach the bottom plate. Remember, it's held in with 8 screws, 4 on each side. Now with that taken care of, I'm going to flip the RC over again. And as you can see, I went ahead and I transferred all the post for the gas tank. Probably should have mentioned that, but yeah. But anyways, to attach this plate, it's held in with 4 screws, just like in the front. After that, I'm going to go ahead and attach the shock tower, which is also held in with 4 screws. With that taken care of, it's time to go ahead and install the engine. But like I mentioned before, that hole is too small for this part to fit into. So I'm going to go ahead and put these 4 nuts underneath the engine and above the chassis. Alright, and the engine has been mounted using these 4 screws. Now since these 4 screws can slide side to side, it gives you the ability to move the spur gear and the clutch belt together or farther apart. You need to have the perfect mesh between the gears. If you don't, then the gears are going to grind or they're going to get destroyed. But I finally got that perfect spacing. So with that taken care of, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the battery tray. Going to slide the wire in through that hole, and then just going to go ahead and lay the battery down, and it's held in place with the battery brace, and it's held down with 4 screws. Once that's taken care of, I'm going to flip the RC over yet again, and now it's time to go ahead and attach the exhaust brace. It's held in with a bolt and nut. Once that's taken care of, I'm going to go ahead and move to the back, and it's time to go ahead and install the gas tank. I'm going to go ahead and get the fuel line that leads from the bottom. I'm going to feed that to the carb. Then I'm going to get the fuel line that leads from the exhaust, plug that into the top, and then the gas tank itself is held in with 3 screws. Once that's all taken care of, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the gear cover. It's held on with 2 screws. With the gear cover taken care of, the last thing I have to concern about is the throttle arm and the brake linkage. You can see that, well, with the new chassis, all the measurements have to be changed. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust them now. Now that that's all been taken care of, the last thing to do is to reattach the 4 tires. So here's before. And here, of course, is after. And guys, you can see that there is a drastic difference in the length of the chassis. I didn't think it was going to be this much. It at least added 2 inches. Everything else fits on there. Also, I forgot to mention that I did put the wire tie downs into the chassis. They snapped in without a problem. Now, as for the body, yes, it barely fits on there. I had to drill some new holes. I really don't care about the extra holes because I'm going to get rid of this body sometime in the future. But I have to say, I am incredibly impressed by the size of this RC. This thing is just ridiculously massive. No wonder why they call it XXL. And that was the level 6 upgrade for Chaos.